Human history is usually presented as a clear and logical sequence, from the first settlements to great civilizations, from simple tools to empires and advanced technologies. But what if this picture is only a convenient version of the past, rather than the complete truth? Across the world, researchers continue to discover objects that do not fit comfortably into the accepted historical timeline. Some appear far too advanced for the period they supposedly belong to, while others seem completely out of place in the archaeological record. Scholars debate them, propose explanations, and continue to study them. Yet in many cases, no final answers exist. And this raises the central question: do we truly understand our past, or are we seeing only a small fragment of a much larger story that has yet to be fully reconstructed? One of the most intriguing mysteries, combining archaeology with deep cultural significance, is the so-called giant footprint of the gods. The most famous example is located on Adam's Peak in Sri Lanka. The depression measures approximately 1.8 meters in length and around 75 centimeters in width. According to mainstream geology, this enormous footprint in the rock is a natural formation. Yet for centuries, it has been regarded as far more than an unusual geological feature. It has become one of the region's most important pilgrimage sites. Buddhists believe it is the footprint of the Buddha. Hindu tradition associates it with Shiva. Islamic tradition connects it to Adam. Local legends preserve even older explanations that often contradict one another. And this alone raises an interesting question. How could one and the same shape become so deeply integrated into several different religious traditions that developed independently over long periods of time? From the perspective of modern geology, the formation resulted from natural erosion, weathering, and the gradual fracturing of rock, eventually producing a shape that resembles a footprint. However, many observers argue that this coincidence appears remarkably structured. Its proportions, overall symmetry, and clearly defined outline create the impression that the formation was not shaped solely by natural forces, but perhaps by a process we still do not fully understand. Perhaps there is still much we do not know. After all, when we find dinosaur footprints preserved in ancient rock, we conclude that dinosaurs once walked there. Yet when a formation resembles a human footprint on a gigantic scale, we are told it is simply a product of nature. That contrast naturally leads some people to ask questions. Another curious detail is how surprisingly little information can be found online about this site, despite the fact that it is one of Sri Lanka's most famous landmarks and attracts countless pilgrims and tourists every year. Even more questions arise when we discover that similar sacred footprints appear in many different parts of the world, from Asia to Europe. In nearly every case, they are associated with the presence of a divine or supernatural being. Archaeologists generally explain this as a recurring cultural archetype. Human beings naturally interpret unusual rock formations through familiar religious beliefs. But this explanation raises another question. Why does this archetype remain so remarkably consistent across civilizations that had little or no contact with one another? And why did the image of a footprint become one of the most widespread symbols in sacred geography? When archaeologists uncovered the first ritual pits in China's Sichuan province during the 1980s, they expected to find ordinary artifacts associated with the early Chinese dynasties. Instead, they encountered the remains of a culture that appeared almost completely unlike anything previously known. Among the discoveries were hundreds of remarkable objects, including massive bronze masks with enormous protruding eyes, some extending forward almost like tubes. There were also gigantic human figures standing more than 2 meters tall. created using an extraordinarily sophisticated bronze casting technique that required highly advanced metallurgical knowledge for roughly 1,000 years before Christ. Perhaps the greatest surprise was that this civilization demonstrated a technological level that, in several respects, does not fit neatly into the conventional picture of regional development. Many of the Sangsingdui bronze artifacts were cast as large and highly complex single structures, requiring precise temperature control and advanced foundry techniques. This has led many researchers to debate whether the culture truly developed in isolation or whether it may have been connected to a much broader network of technological exchange across ancient Asia. An even greater mystery is that the ritual pits contain very little evidence of everyday life. The kinds of domestic objects normally found in large settlements are almost completely absent. Instead, it appears that these valuable artifacts were deliberately removed from circulation, perhaps during a massive ceremonial event or as part of the intentional destruction of an important religious center. Some researchers have even suggested that the site may preserve evidence of a major catastrophe or social collapse from which the civilization never fully recovered. And this is where the mystery becomes even more compelling. Despite decades of excavation, archaeologists have never discovered written records capable of explaining the Sangsingdui civilization in its own words. New excavations in 2021 uncovered hundreds of additional artifacts, including spectacular golden masks and ritual objects. Yet not a single inscription has revealed who these people truly were, or why their civilization disappeared. We are left with the strange paradox of observing an extraordinarily advanced culture that seems to have left no written explanation of itself. There is another detail that continues to puzzle researchers. Scientific analysis has shown that some Sangsingdui artifacts contain materials and alloy components that do not match local geological sources. This suggests either that the civilization maintained far wider trade connections than previously believed, or that certain materials and technologies arrived by routes we have not yet identified. Perhaps even more intriguing, several objects display evidence of being melted down and recast centuries apart. It is as though someone deliberately returned to these artifacts over many generations, reshaping them while somehow preserving their original symbolic significance. This raises an unsettling possibility. Are these simply the remains of one lost civilization, or are they fragments of a much longer cultural tradition whose history has been broken apart and scattered across time? In South America, the Sayhuite stone in Peru represents yet another object that refuses to fit neatly into simple explanations. This enormous carved boulder is covered with hundreds of intricate features resembling channels, reservoirs, terraces, stairways, and geometric structures. Some researchers have interpreted it as a miniature landscape model or even as a three-dimensional representation of an ancient hydraulic system. What makes the stone especially unusual is that its complexity and level of detail seem far beyond what many would normally expect from the known Andean cultures of that period. If it truly represents either a symbolic or practical model, it demonstrates an impressive level of abstract engineering thought that is rarely observed elsewhere in the archaeological record of the region. This naturally leads to another question. Why does no clearly related artistic or engineering tradition appear to continue this style of representation? If such knowledge once existed, where did it come from? Or could it have belonged to a civilization that has not yet been discovered? Many researchers have also noticed that the stone appears less like a finished sculpture and more like an object that was gradually modified over long periods of time, almost as though different generations continued adding new details. If so, we may be looking either at a unique experiment that was never repeated, or at the surviving fragment of a much larger body of knowledge that has since been lost. Several competing theories attempt to explain the Saihuite stone, and each completely changes our understanding of what it might represent. The most widely accepted interpretation suggests that it is neither a geographical map nor a decorative carving, but rather a ritual model of the universe, where the carved channels and depressions symbolize ancient cosmological ideas rather than real rivers and landscapes. Another fascinating possibility is that it functioned as an educational tool, a kind of stone textbook used to teach hydraulic engineering, water management, and landscape design. Students could literally study the movement of water and the principles of terrain using a three-dimensional physical model. According to another interpretation, the Saihuite stone may have served as an engineering prototype. In this view, every channel, depression, terrace, and basin represents part of a miniature hydraulic system. Water could have been poured across the surface to simulate flow, pressure, and storage before constructing actual irrigation systems in the valleys of the Andes. In a sense, it would have functioned as a form of three-dimensional engineering simulation long before the invention of computers. Considering the officially accepted stages of technological development in the region, such an idea is certainly remarkable. Another theory suggests that the stone may preserve the model of a real hydraulic network that once existed but has since been destroyed or buried beneath the landscape. If that were true, the stone would represent the only surviving miniature record of an infrastructure that has otherwise vanished. Some researchers also believe that the object may have evolved over many generations, with each era adding new carvings that gradually transformed a relatively simple design into the extraordinarily complex structure we see today. There is even a more speculative hypothesis suggesting that the stone functioned as a system for encoding information, where knowledge was preserved not through written language, but through spatial relationships and geometric patterns that modern observers are no longer able to interpret. Regardless of which explanation proves correct, one question remains difficult to ignore. How could people living during that era possess such advanced knowledge and create an object with such extraordinary precision and detail? Who taught them these techniques? Or was the stone truly the product of the people traditionally believed to have made it? Human history often appears to resemble a completed mosaic. Yet the more discoveries are made, the more missing pieces become visible. Mysterious artifacts, vanished civilizations, and unexplained underground complexes all suggest that our past may be far more complicated than the familiar historical narrative we usually encounter. There is a growing sense that some discoveries either receive too little attention or are explained too quickly, without fully exploring every possible interpretation. As a result, many important questions remain unanswered, suspended somewhere between scientific theories, educated speculation, and phenomena that simply refuse to fit within conventional models. That is precisely why these discoveries continue to inspire so much debate. They exist on the boundary between the known and the unknown, between what has already entered history books and what still awaits explanation. And perhaps the most fascinating aspect is not the answers themselves, but the realization that our understanding of the past is still far from complete. That is all for today. Please let us know in the comments which of these mysteries you find most convincing and which explanations seem the most plausible to you. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There are many more fascinating mysteries ahead that may completely change the way we think about the distant past. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again in the next video.